We're now learning of top secret detention centers being built across the country. Data shows that the plan is to have them built in all 50 states, guys. Now, you may be wondering as to what these facilities will actually be used for. And just to kind of set your expectations, it's not looking good. A federal contractor has recently confirmed that these facilities will be used to house people. Now, it's logical to think that the federal government is expecting a lot of illegal immigrants to come in and use these centers. However, Christy Hutcherson, the contractor that I was talking about, says that this is not the case. Because if we go by space, there's a lot to go around. ICE facilities alone could hold thousands upon thousands of these individuals. So who's this new space for? Well, the idea is that they may be used to hold people who are against conforming to new policies. We can even go so far as to call these people mavericks, as they tend to think independently. During the past few years, this kind of practice has been discouraged, especially if you think about the pandemic, where we were forced to hole up in our houses for months on science that was unfounded at the time. So you could say that this is all a conspiracy theory, but you can't refute that the health crisis showed us just how much power the government has over us if we were to go by their narrative. And just to prove it further, we have to ask a simple question. Why would they need to build more detention centers if the ones that ICE has are mostly empty? And yet we still hear of illegal immigrants being released into the United States because that's what they're telling us, that they don't have space.
Tonight, new evidence migrants who cross the border illegally are still being released into the U.S. by border agents, 1 week after President Biden signed an executive action suspending their entry.
If they choose to come without permission and against the law, they'll be restricted from receiving asylum and staying in the United States.
But NBC News has learned Border Patrol is still releasing many migrants into the U.S. who crossed illegally to pursue asylum claims. A senior DHS official tells NBC News those releases have dropped by more than half, but are still happening because agents don't have enough space to detain the large numbers of arriving migrants. An internal memo to Border Patrol agents in San Diego directs agents there to release migrants into the United States unless they are from these 8 countries. Overall, illegal border crossings under the new policy are still high, but have dropped from 4,000 to 3,000 per day, DHS sources tell us. President Biden signed the executive action after fierce criticism of his handling of the border, with a record nearly 10 million migrants entering the U.S. since he took office. But the Border Patrol union says the president's new action is not tough enough.
It's status quo. Things have not changed. This executive order has not made any significant impact as it relates to the illegal border crossings.
Now, we see this concern from Border Patrol agents that say that this executive action from President Joe Biden really hasn't done a thing out there, and that they don't have enough room to detain the large number of arriving illegal immigrants, which is quite weird because I know for a fact that there are ICE detention centers in different states that are practically empty. I mean, take California, for example, right? Just last year, write-ups came out about how taxpayers in California, they're pouring millions of dollars to fund hundreds of empty immigration and customs enforcement detention beds. The Adelanto ICE processing center can hold almost 2,000 detainees, but it's been empty due to a COVID-19 court order. The contractor that's running the facility, though, they're still making money. The Geo Group is making around $85 million annually, despite having almost no detainees inside their facilities. So if you're from California, you are paying for detention facilities that are kind of useless. And as time went on, the number of daily average individuals in custody, it dropped drastically compared to the amount of bed space available. Even though late last year, we saw multiple states and localities declare a state of emergency. Now, this was seen in San Diego, it was seen in Chicago, New York City, the state of Texas, the state of Massachusetts, and many others. And yet, instead of detaining these individuals in available detention centers, they were let out into the United States. ICE officers blamed the policies of the Biden administration as to why all of this is happening, which now kind of begs the question, if there's so much space in these facilities, then why isn't the White House doing anything? Well, they are doing something. The problem is they're going at a snail's pace. The Department of Justice recently filed a request for the U.S. District Court of Central District of California Eastern Division. The request was for them to lift the ban on new detainees at the facility in Adelanto, California. Texas Representative Jay Obernolte, he welcomed the idea and said that he's been pushing for months to have this place reopened, which now brings me to the startling news from Christy Hutcherson, guys. In a recent interview with J.J. Carell, a man who has worked for the Customs and Border Protection protection for almost 2 decades. Hutcherson discussed the massive detention facilities that are being built in all 50 states. She says that the true number of illegals that have entered the country since Biden took over is closer to 30 million people. But since they want to introduce these individuals as newcomers to the country, these facilities will be more like concentration camps. Not for illegal immigrants, for individuals who will be introduced to society and given housing and jobs. These facilities, according to her, will be for dissidents. Like I said a moment ago, these will be used to hold mavericks and independent thinkers, those who choose to go against the grain and the narrative. Now, I understand that what she's saying sounds a little bit like a conspiracy theory, but if we think about it, it actually makes sense. And she's not just saying this because of a hunch. She has access to a federal database where she has seen multiple bids on detention facilities to be built across all 50 states. These are things that we are not being told. And it's pretty alarming to think that facilities are being built for Americans instead of illegal immigrants, right? But of course, don't misunderstand. I know that there are those who are honestly seeking asylum here in our country. That's not the problem. The problem is that the Biden administration is opening our doors and our windows to anyone who wants to come in. Meanwhile, it kind of seems like they're preparing detention spaces for anyone who speaks against them. Now, I know it sounds kind of crazy, but at this point, crazy is like the new normal. Just look at what happened recently. 8 illegal immigrants were arrested for their ties to terrorist organization ISIS. They were able to cross the border without issue. But after some time passed, it was then realized that they were possible terrorists. This means that there are now confirmed threats inside our country. But even with that, it's you and I that they're worried about.
Now to an alarming story about the southern border. According to federal law enforcement, 8 people with suspected ties to the terror group ISIS have been arrested after crossing that border from Mexico. ICE agents made these arrests near Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and New York, and our Errol Barnett has been following the story.
CBS News has learned ICE, in coordination with the FBI, detained 8 migrants over the last few days. This after investigators obtained new information, in part via a wiretap, potentially connecting them to ISIS. Sources say there is not an active terror plot. U.S. officials tell CBS News all 8 foreign nationals are from Tajikistan, a Central Asian country that borders Afghanistan and China. A senior Homeland Security official says the migrants were previously processed and vetted by CBP at the southern border, but without proper documents. They were released into the U.S. with notices to appear in court. CBS News national security contributor Samantha Vinograd.
This is an example of the system working. New information about these individuals became available and arrests were made.
These arrests come after ISIS-K, a regional affiliate of ISIS with an active presence in Tajikistan, claimed responsibility for a deadly attack at a March concert in Moscow.
Increasingly concerning is the potential for a coordinated attack here in the homeland, not unlike the ISIS-K attack we saw at the Russia concert hall.
Last week, FBI Director Christopher Wray said there had been an uptick in the number of suspected terrorists attempting to cross the border in recent years, and warned that budget cuts were hurting his agency's ability to learn about them.
Now, I have a separate video where I break down exactly what happened with these 3 terrorists and their plans for 3 major cities right here at home. So be sure to check out that video because you need to know exactly what's really happening nowadays, guys. So of course, I'll leave a link for you in the description down below so you can check out that video right now. As always, I really appreciate you guys being here. Please keep safe. Thanks so much for hitting the like button. Thank you for subscribing to the channel and sharing this video, and I will see you guys on the next one.